Hi, we are so delighted to have Jamie Childs here for our masterclass. Jamie Childs is a prolific director whose work spans from Doctor Who to His Dark Materials. Whilst directing acclaimed series such as His Dark Materials, he has also written and produced and directed his own short films. We are delighted to have him here today for this masterclass in directing. So I'm Fabs, the producer. Should we go around team and introduce ourselves?
Maddie, the writer and director.
Hey, Maddie.
Hi, I'm Hannah, assistant director.
And I'm Sasha, I'm assistant producing.
Hey guys, and I'm Jamie, coming to answer some questions, hopefully not badly.
I'm sure they'll be fine. Okay, so starting with our intro questions, when did you know you wanted to be a director or even work in film?
So, yeah, I think for me, it was kind of like, I don't really think I ever approached this job as like a director. It was, I think I kind of like, I've always been quite practical in like how I do things and sort of I experiment with different equipment and the different aspects of like things that I've done along the way. Like I actually went to university and studied sound engineering. So that was like kind of, I guess, the sort of first professional step towards what I do. And it was, whilst I was kind of doing that, I think for me, I was kind of like, yeah, I like the idea of working in the film industry, but I'm not quite sure how to get into it. And I thought like maybe sound engineering, because I was in a band at the time and I was like kind of recording the music and stuff. And I started getting into all the equipment and thinking like, oh, this is quite fun. Actually, I could do this. And then realized that I could potentially do that for film. So like the kind of sound design and stuff. And whilst I was at university doing that, I started like thinking, oh, I should like maybe make some of the content to do the sound for. Picked up some cameras we had and stuff, and then started going out and shooting kind of experimental bits and pieces. I'd done like little things before that, just at home and like with friends, and we kind of like experimented with cameras and just, but it was much more like Chris Cunningham style, glitchy music video-y, experimental, like really avant-garde kind of stuff. And and I was always kind of making things that were very sound orientated as well, so I could do lots of like sound design for them and things. And then I guess like just that naturally evolved into me going, oh, is this like what directing is? And I didn't really even think about it like that. And but I did start, reading books on directing. I think the first book I ever read was like, there was two actually, the Rain Dance Film Festival Guide to Directing, I think, and the Guerrilla Handbook, which was like the one, that was great. I mean, I don't know if that's still around, whether people read that so much anymore, but it was like, that was a really good like little masterclass into like the process of what professional directing could be. And I was well off that at that point. And I think at university, I was thinking maybe I could make a short or something like that. And keeping in mind that like cameras, I'm only 33, but the cameras we had at uni were like PD-150s, which were the tape-based cameras, and they didn't look very professional. And I mean, they were okay, but they were like, they weren't cinema cameras. So we were still trying to get hold of film. And that was just obviously impossible, and we could never really afford to do it and stuff. But that kind of changed whilst I was at uni, and the DSLRs and stuff came out, and and then you could start getting access to like red cameras and things, and we were like, well, so it was an interesting time actually, where it went from being like incredibly hard to make a short to all of a sudden being like, oh, we can get our access to cinema cameras all of a sudden.
That's so exciting. We considered briefly shooting it on film, and then we were like, we cannot afford that. We're not going to do that. What tips would you give to students that were in the same position as you? Would you say like read that Rain Dance guide, or just sort of like have a play, have an experiment?
Yeah, I think a bit of both really. I mean, like, I think that the best thing, and it's like cliche advice from directors to say this, but I think the best thing you can really do is just go and do stuff like, film stuff. I mean, the fact is even anyone could get access to any kind of camera now. That's just like bog standard, because you can shoot things on phones that look pretty good. Steven Soderbergh shot a feature film on an iPhone, and you can get like adapters that give it a more professional look and stuff, and anamorphic lenses and things like that. And I'm just like, there is really no excuse to not just go and make something and like a little indie story or whatever it is, or just yeah. And I'm the shows I'm on now, which are like, huge budget shows that kind of, I'm still using the same methods that I learned doing that. The first time, it's not, every single bit of experience that you get along the way, like whether that's just cutting that shot with that shot, or a wide with a close, or like how you just put scenes together, or whatever they are, like every single time you do it, right or wrong, at any level, will come in handy. I guarantee it, because you've done it already. And there are only really a finite amount of different sort of variables. and chances are if you just keep trying stuff, like eventually you kind of, yeah, you go back to the same tricks and you know what doesn't work, and you know, so everything is valuable experience.
Talking about sort of like putting everything together, I feel like a lot of people kind of know what a director does, but don't really know the nitty gritty day-to-day stuff. What would you say you do sort of like on a normal day being a director?
So I guess it depends on the stage of the production, you know, like, so if I was, well, if I'm on a production, which you know, I've been fortunate enough to be kind of working constantly for like the last few years on dramas. And so, you know, you kind of like, you start a job and obviously you have the interview process. So that's a very different like version of yourself where you're kind of going around sort of, you know, you're essentially like auditioning really in a weird kind of way, you know, kind of having these sort of chats with people, you know, and whatever else. And then, you know, and then maybe you get sent some scripts and you start reading them and you have to like start giving your kind of approach to that and thinking about, you know, how you might tackle creating something like that hasn't been visualized yet and it's just at script stage. And then, you know, if you're lucky and you get the job, then you start into a pre-production kind of process. And that's sort of like I don't know, for myself, it's always like a period of, it's probably not my most favorite period of the production itself. I actually do like shooting. Like some directors hate shooting. I actually really enjoy it. Like I feel like for me, it's like my kind of flow state when I'm in the middle of, you know, I really feel like I'm just reacting on impulse and stuff like that. Like I am a planner, but I'm also somebody who can kind of be like quite free with the process and that kind of thing. But the pre-production period is always one that like, and it depends on the job. Like you approach it differently depending on what kind of drama it is or whatever else. You know, but so day to day, it's kind of that, yeah, like I say, it's very different depending on what you're doing. So it's sort of different hats really. And I think that's part of the thing about being a decent director is that you have to be able to like do, you know, not everyone, some people are really good at one thing and less good at other things. I'm maybe more of an all-rounder, so I don't necessarily excel in one bit, but I'm kind of adaptable. And that's always sort of like been my approach, like, you know, figure out what it is that people do around you and like try and learn a little bit of everything. I found that to be a useful thing to do.
And you spoke a bit about kind of auditioning or interviewing for jobs. How did you first become involved with His Dark Materials, and what was kind of the process of getting on board like?
So that was yeah, basically I was in Cardiff already doing Doctor Who, Jodie Whittaker's first one, like the first female Doctor, and that was a great experience. I loved doing that, and actually was an excellent step towards Dark Materials because it was kind of, you know, similar world. And I think obviously in Britain we haven't had loads of like high concept dramas and stuff being made. You know, we have a lot of like regular dramas and whatever, and we're pretty good at that stuff. But in terms of when you get into the fantastical and things, like there hasn't been loads. So I've been quite fortunate to get those jobs, and sort of my career's gone in that direction because, you know, they're really fun to make, and I've always been into that kind of stuff. But actually what happened was I finished Doctor Who, and that was kind of like a reboot of Doctor Who in some ways. It was like we were shooting it quite differently. Obviously we had Jodie being a new Doctor and stuff. And Bad Wolf, the company that make Dark Materials, had got sort of wind of me from the BBC because of, obviously it's for the same network and stuff. And they'd been quite pleased with what I'd done. And then I got asked to go and interview, but it was really short notice. I think I'd just finished Doctor Who-ish. I was like in post, and I got a call from my agent saying like, oh, they'd really love to interview you for this show, His Dark Materials. And I was like, where's the interview? And they were like, oh, it's just around the corner, literally, because the two studios in Cardiff, like you've got BBC Studios does Doctor Who, and then Bad Wolf, which is literally just across like there's kind of like a harbour, and it's like sort of the other side of that. And all I remember, and I'm probably like, you know, it's quite funny that I'll be seeing this in a public space, but all I remember is thinking, I actually used to live in the same village as Philip Pullman, like for a short period of my life. And so I was really aware of who he was and stuff. And but I'd never read His Dark Materials growing up. Like I hadn't read those books when I was there. And I remember somebody gave them to me when I was probably about 22 years old, and I was kind of like getting into directing and stuff at the time. And somebody said, "Oh, you should read these books. You'll really like them." And I thought, and it was there were those books that were always like on the side, and I was like always going to read them, and never ever got round to it. And then the day that they called me up and said, "You've got a meeting for His Dark Materials, and it's tomorrow," I was like, "Why didn't I read those books?" And so I had like 24 hours to cram as much His Dark Materials into my brain as I possibly could. Yeah, which was quite a stressful process, but it's fine. So that's how I got the interview. It was just kind of through Doctor Who, really, and you know, sort of word of mouth, really.
That's a great story to have a little scoop on, I think, as well. And you kind of touched upon the fact that it's quite kind of otherworldly for a drama, especially in like British drama. I guess with Doctor Who as well, how do you find that directing stuff that's got this kind of fantastical element differs to directing other things?
Well, I think like the way I always think about it is like, because, you know, now I've fallen into a category where I get sort of, you know, and it's a good position to be in. I can't complain at all. It's like, but I get looked at for those kind of shows now, you know, like fantastical things, and people will say, well, you can do that kind of stuff, and I'm like, well, yeah, but the thing is that really you're just focusing on the same elements that you do in any drama, really. You know, like people think, oh, big CGI or big effects or whatever it is. So I just put those to one side for a second, like, and think about what the drama is actually about. And, you know, that's kind of the way we approach Dark Materials anyway, although it does have lots of VFX and it does have lots of big sequences and things like that. It's really like, you know, what's the heart of the show? And that's the drama anyway. So it's like really focusing on that and the character relationships and stuff, and what really the story is about, and then the rest is garnish on top of that. And if you think about a show like that, you don't kind of, it doesn't phase you quite so much. You don't get so stressed out by thinking, oh my god, this is so big, I can't deal with it. And you've you know, and you've also got lots of people around you who are good at their jobs and they can help you along with it, and, you know, have a lot of support around you and stuff. And if you use that wisely, then, you know, you don't have to take on all the workload yourself. And yeah, that's kind of how I would approach it. You know, kind of figure out what the drama, what's the narrative about, what's the story about, and approach that like you would any other drama. And then the other bits are kind of like, you know, sort of almost separate to that, really.
Yeah, and you said that alongside doing these kind of TV series, you've done shorts as well on the side. What's the main difference that you find between doing TV or like series and directing short films?
Do you know what? It's funny. Like when you, like I say, once you get into like big budget things, you know, you think it's going to be so different. You know, it's going to be massively different, and to some extent, it is like on a technical aspect, and, you know, and all that kind of stuff. But like at the end of the day, you're really just making the same things again. Like it's the, you know, you end up with similar shots and you end up with similar storytelling skills, and it's all, so whatever you learn on the shorts, you know, you bring to those big shoots, and it's the same techniques, really. So the reasoning behind me always kind of doing the shorts in between, and it's something I still do. I haven't had a lot of time to do that kind of stuff on the side recently, although I am yearning to. You know, it's always been that kind of thing for me. Like if I'm not shooting a big drama, like I'll be like, great, I can go off and do something like experimental, or I can do something, you know, that I want to do, like a story that doesn't have like lots of, you know, the thing about making, actually the biggest difference between making big network shows is that you have lots of obviously exec producers on it and things like that, who all have their version of what the show might be. So you're compromising in a lot of places, and that's not necessarily a bad thing, because that's part of what your job is as a TV director. You know, you're not just doing it for yourself, you're doing it for a network, and you have to be able to deliver what they want from the show, and that's part of your skill. But the freedom that you get from making a short that is entirely yours is kind of like the only time as a professional director you're really going to get that freedom, because, you know, as soon as you move on to a big drama, you're working for a big network, or if you do a big feature film, somebody's probably paying for that. So, you know, you're not gonna, whereas a short can be made out of your money or whatever, or made for free, and you can really get a chance to experiment. So that is really the brush to canvas version of filmmaking, where you just go, all right, I'm just gonna do my thing, and I'm just gonna, you know, and really do that with it as well. Don't try and play it safe. Like, don't do what you want people, don't think what you like, don't just try and replicate something else that you know works, and don't try and give somebody what you think that they want, because you can never tell what they want, and they don't even know what they want. You know, it's even the same in the big shows. Like, you can't always be second guess what everyone wants around you, because you probably get it wrong anyway, and then you won't make something that's true to you. So, but with the shorts, you really do get that freedom, and it's like, and that's fun, you know, and that's why I do it in between, because I just go off and go, right, I'm going to make something really fun now. That's, you know, there's not so much stress hanging over it.
Yeah, no, definitely. And you touched upon like working with multiple directors. What's the kind of dynamic there like? You said you have to compromise a lot. How does that kind of vary? And also, is there a particular director that you kind of look up to, or try and that you're influenced by?
So yeah, so working. So I've worked in different positions on different shows. So I've come in on shows where I've been like a like TV shows are broken into blocks normally. So you have like, you know, maybe a 2-episode block for one director, and then you'll do your 2 episodes, and then another director will come in. So I've done shows where I've kind of slotted into that, and it's already been established or whatever, and I've kind of had to, you know, work with the things that I'm given, or work around, you know, a style that's been set up or whatever. So that's something, like I said, about being adaptable. Like if you are an adaptable director, you should be able to do that like easy enough. And then I've worked in other shows, like the show I'm on now. I'm an executive producer director, so I have like a creative role over the whole series. So it's like I help like curate who comes on to do the other episodes and stuff. So in this case, I've sort of set up the style that other directors will sort of follow on from, if you know what I mean, to try and keep the show like as a whole piece, like feeling a similar thing all the way through. And that's you know, I mean, I guess with some shows they really need to feel the same all the way through. Some shows less so. Like His Dark Materials was kind of interesting because you kind of go on a journey, and you know, especially in the first series, you go on a journey where it kind of changes and it becomes a little bit more fantasy as it goes on, and you know, so it can change style a little bit as it goes. Some shows need to be really strict. If they're just like a procedural crime drama, for example, their parts, like every director kind of has to make it feel the same. And that's a different sort of job, really. Some directors are just really good at doing that as well. They're like really like, you know, TV directors that come in, nail the style and whatever. And yeah, but I've always like kind of worked on shows where I've had a little bit more freedom on my block and stuff, you know. Yeah. And you said who influences me, directors. I'm a bit like, I've got some a bit basic when it comes to this, but I'm a massive Steven Spielberg fan. I just love him. And you know, there's loads of other directors I love, but like that is my childhood sort of like, you know, spirit that's still coming out. Like you know, I grew up with big blockbusters, family blockbusters, really, and like, you know, but that kind of like real warm, sentimental family sort of stories, and with a bit of fantasy chucked in as well. And yeah, that's why I sort of love those. And I've always tried to like kind of be like, why don't we make those kind of things in Britain? You know, and it seems like we are starting to, and I'm lucky to be involved in that world as it's happening.
That is a very fair choice. And then quickly, one final question before we move on to the quickfire round. What are the main styles that you chose for His Dark Materials then? Kind of how do you sum up the kind of whole vibe that you're going for with that?
Well, I think partly, I mean, what I tried to do with His Dark Materials is not kind of, again, I didn't try to replicate something as such that I'd seen. Like, you know, obviously you're going to be influenced by the things that you love and whatever, and you know that there's certain, you know, you'd be stupid not to take on board the things that you know work and in other films that you love and stuff like that. But I was kind of just trying to be, and I think it was getting to the point in my career where I finally started to feel like I had my own voice a little bit. You know, up until that point, I'm always kind of you know, it's hard to just feel confident and approach the material from a gut. And but I think with Dark Materials, I sort of was at that stage where I started going, you know, let's just figure out what is true to what's on the page, you know, and try and like do that, and not just try and put in a cool shot or try and put in a cool style or whatever it was, or like the style that is expected of it. I was just like, let's see what the material gives me and try and approach it in that way. And obviously, like the thing about something like Dark Materials, even though it's a huge show, remember that you don't always have like unlimited possibilities. You can't just do everything the way that you want it. You know, you can't just go, I'd love to shoot this in this way or in this place or whatever. You know, reality is on big shows, actually, you end up with kind of a lot more restrictions than you expect. So, you know, it's like scheduling is a huge part of it. It's like, you might say, well, you can't shoot there because on this day we're going to be here and we can't get there in time and all this kind of stuff, or we can't stay there overnight. Or so you're trying to find, often you're shooting things that you think, God, I wouldn't even shoot this in a short film. Like it isn't quite right for what I'm trying to do, but you have to make it work. And obviously you've got like a little bit of help from VFX and stuff, so they can like augment an environment. You might end up shooting in a car park for something, for example, and and you put a green screen up in a car park and you're like that. We actually ran out of on Dark Materials, we actually ran out of stage space because we had so many sets built. So we ended up doing things like, oh, can you shoot it in a field out the back kind of thing? And that's like a lot of the time it is like that. And then Hollywood filmmaking is the same. I suppose there's a producer friend of mine who's like kind of a big Hollywood producer, and he was saying there's a little bit of grass in the car park at like Universal Studios in California, and he was saying the amount of park scenes for like Central Park and stuff that have been shot on that bit of grass I'm like, what bit of grass? And he's like, there. And I'm going, you mean that little patch of scrubby like grassland outside of the thing? Because yeah, you wouldn't believe how many, like even Hitchcock like shot some part things on that. And I'm good. But it's kind of true, you know, once you got your wide shot of, you know, Central Park, Manhattan, and then you go into your 2 close-ups, like no one really cares. Like, you know, as long as the drama's good, we're fine. Get away with it.
It's amazing. Moving on to the kind of quick fire directing for dummies questions. What are your first steps when you read a script for the first time, or a script that you haven't written? And do you kind of have technical aspects in mind when you look at it?
So my first approach to a script, depending on how complex it is, like sometimes if, for example, like the fantasy things that you talk about, I've been working on, they can be quite complicated, especially when you're taking in new characters, new locations, all this kind of stuff, because I haven't written it. So I'll actually sometimes early stages of prep do a breakdown, like, which is kind of like probably the most technical, boring thing that I do in terms of a script. But if I write my own little scene descriptions into like, I don't know, a PowerPoint or whatever, into an Excel or something, and then just write like what characters are in that scene or whatever else, it gives me like you know, I think if anything, I'll probably never look back at it ever. It's just that it will go, all right, I know what that scene's about. Like, cause I had to write like a little description of what it is. So I'll always go, oh, that's the scene with those 2 characters in, and this, you know, so that I find like a really useful thing to just kind of quickly figure out what's sort of where, and it mind maps it out for me, I think. But then, cause I'm sort of more of a creative person than a kind of, I guess, like regimented, organized kind of person, I actually started doing these things on dark materials that were these tiny little maps. So I would go through scene by scene and I would draw like a tiny little picture of, say, what that location was. So say it was like the tower in season 2, and I draw a little tower with like a Will and Lyra, like little character next to it, and just write a tiny little description. And then I draw a little line. I'll send you guys a picture of it and you can see. But it ended up being like, and then I just draw like a line to the next one, to the next one, and it ends up like going like weaving through. And I could quickly go, and I just had a 1 sheet of A4, so quickly I could go, that scene's this, and it's got this, because you shoot everything out of order as well. So, you know, you kind of need to be able to quickly just look and go, oh, that's that, and it's in that location, and it's got those characters in it. So that's probably the first thing I would do.
That sounds amazing. So visual. Do you plan certain shots when you, having read it, or do you think, oh, I'd want to shoot from this angle or use this kind of technique? Like when you've read it for the first time or the second time, do you have that kind of almost visualizing how it would look on screen?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, I think you know, the first time I read it, I'll try and just read it and not get too bogged down with that. Just try and enjoy it. And because that's sort of like often one of the most creative times before you start having to do anything. It's just what comes to you. I think you've got to be really careful about like being like, I visualized it like this, therefore that is the way I need to do it. Because what you're actually doing is you're projecting a very 2-dimensional finished image of the film. Like you're sort of going, yeah, but I imagine the characters were there and they said this, and you know, and I shot like this. And it's like that what they say that that Judith Weston book, which I don't know if you guys have read it, it's the Directing Actors, it's called. It's the best filmmaking book I've ever read. Like, it's amazing. And that she's a genius. And it's like, she says in that book, she calls it the director's vision. And she's like, the director's vision is like the death of like spontaneity. And like, it's very true. It's like, and she described it as a two-dimensional finished film being projected like a theater in the front of your head. And I'm like, yeah, it's true. You get that. And you have to break that and chuck it away, because if you're locked into that, you're sort of not seeing off the ends. Like, you're not seeing what's beyond that. And it's like, you got to be really careful not to just like go with your impulse, because it's not always right. But sometimes obviously you can be completely right, or at least an approach, and you need to decide one.
Do you ever use devising then when you're directing? Do you ever like sit down and go, oh, we're just going to devise a scene loosely based on the script? Or is it quite regimented, having like TV production pressures?
No, I mean, we have, no, completely, we have done that. I mean, one of the things in TV is you don't really get a lot of time for rehearsals. Like, you basically, your actors that you're trying to get, especially when you get into like A-list names and things like that, you're lucky to get them for the days that you need them just to shoot. So, you know, even to get them like beyond that, or even for maybe a read through, potentially you try and get together. And that's probably about as far as a rehearsal will go in TV. You know, everyone's around the table and maybe get one read through, and that's it. And then maybe a little bit of discussion about the script or character. And then on the day, you kind of, you know, the way that the day is structured is you'll start a scene, you block the scene first, like maybe that's just me and the actors, and then you do that as quickly as you can, because really your day is like, you've got to speed through it, and you've got to get a lot of coverage for television. Plus you want to make it look good. You don't want to make it look like you didn't, do it properly. So you kind of, that's maybe when you start to figure. Ideally, I'll always go with an approach. So I'll have worked out blocking probably in my head for most scenes, and chances are, not always necessarily right, but like you've sat and thought about it, and if you can think of what that room's going to look like, that those actors are in, and where they're going to roughly be, and where you want them to end up, and why there's an intention for all that, then even if you work that out on a bit of paper at home, it's probably not going to be massively different once you get into the room. And actors will probably tell you that it's definitely going to be different. And then by the end of it, you're kind of going, oh, this is quite similar to what I imagined it would be. But not always. And obviously people do come with good, new, fresh ideas that you didn't think of at all. And that's also good. And you need to be ready to adapt to that as well. Go with a good plan. Always go with a good plan, I think. That's like my thing. Because you don't want to turn up and look like you don't have a clue what you're doing. So it's like always have a plan, but be ready to completely chuck that plan away if there's a better way of doing it on the day,
Definitely. Really good advice. Specifically for a short film, do you have any kind of like top tips, or like what we should prioritize most in terms of like budget or time, or like collaborative things and stuff like that?
Yeah, I mean, in terms of your budget, like I don't know what you guys have like, for it, but I've done with shorts, I've never really had any money to make them at all, actually. Like, and even in between projects, like if I've just come off a big drama and then I make a short, like chances are that's made for 500 quid out of my own pocket kind of thing. It's not like I don't go and get funding from the BFI because I'm a TV director or something like that. Like I wouldn't even know how to do that. So like for me, I've never ever come from that background of like, oh, I'll get a grant from these guys or a grant from these guys. By the time I was sitting around whilst waiting for my friends to do that, I'd already made like 2 shorts in the time that they were waiting to get like 10 or 20 grand or whatever it was. So I'd like, and I just kind of just thought, well, what do I need? Like, if I really want this location and it's going to cost me this much, can I just use that location, which is free, and it's kind of going to do the same thing, And I think that's what I learned early on. And believe me, it's no different on big dramas. It's you think you really want something, and then you can't get it, and then you're just like, okay, how can I solve this problem creatively? And I think, so with a short, like, the only thing you want to be paying for really is the things that you literally can't get for free. That's it. And like that might be, I need to get some lights dropped off, so I need to hire a van. Or the one thing you definitely need, always, I think, never scrimp on is feeding people well. That's like, I think, probably one of the best bits of advice I can give you in terms of film crew, because sometimes the catering's bad on like proper jobs as well, and that's the only thing you'll end up hearing about. So I think people are quite simple in that sense. Like they just want a good meal, and if you give them a good meal, they're like happy to do anything, do anything for free. So that's definitely a priority in terms of your budget. But yeah, anything else, like I'm sure you can beg, steal and borrow mostly. And, until you absolutely need to spend that bit of cash, and then do that. But yeah, and then in any other sort of priorities with shorts, I think, yeah, just like I say, it's just whatever you were thinking, just think outside of that as well. Always have a backup plan, because, things are going to fall through. And, you especially as the director, you wouldn't believe how many sort of budgetary problems I'm solving on big shows with creativity. Like that is always, and a producer will try and come at you saying, oh, we can't afford this, we can't afford that, whatever. But like, unless you offer up a solution, or they're not offering up a solution. It's like it's kind of your job as a director to go, okay, well, I don't need to do it like that. I can do it like this. And it's kind of the same. And I've just saved 10 grand or whatever,
Definitely. In terms of pre-production and planning, how best would you recommend working with like the DP and the cinematographer in planning how you're going to shoot, and in the discussions that you have and stuff like that?
I mean, that's obviously entirely up to you as a director, and how much support you feel like you need from the DOP in that way. Like I've always had like close relationships with my DOPs, and they're personal friends of mine and things like that. And they, I'm in a fortunate position now where they just kind of get me, and like they probably know I'm probably predictable as hell, so they probably know what I'm going to do anyway. But I think, judging by the kind of film that you're making, like you probably want a bit of freedom and stuff anyway, and you want to find it. And it's like, it's that kind of thing where actually the spontaneous nature of like finding the thing that works. And like, that's the beauty about short. Like, you haven't got a big crew that you need to keep, like, you know, if I turn up to a location and say I'm going to shoot this direction, that's, you know, keep in mind on this show now we have like something like 15 lorries everywhere we go. So, you know, they have to be parked somewhere. And like, you know, if I say I want to shoot over here and they're like, okay, cool, you're going to shoot there, right? There. So we can park the lorries there. And I'm like, yeah, I think so. And then I turn around and actually I'm like, oh no, well, that ain't going to happen anymore. Because like there's 15 lorries parked there. So it's like with a short film, you can be like, oh, actually, look how the light's coming through there. And like, you guys can just change instantly. And, you know, so what I would say was, in answer to your question about like prep with a DOP, and I think this just, I try and encourage directors and DOPs this all the time anyway. Like, don't let your DOP get you bogged down in technical jargon and stuff and technicalities of like shots and, or should we use this piece of equipment or whatever. It's like, talk to them about the story. Like, you know, like there's not enough directors and DOPs talk about the narrative. Like, why are you going to do something? Like, you don't even want to be thinking about a camera or lens until you realize what the emotion is in that scene, you know, and then you'll know what piece of equipment you need to use. It's like, you know, the last thing you want to, because you might get a DOP or maybe in it's slightly more inexperienced or excited to do something new. And they're like, oh, I've got this really cool crane, or we can do this really cool crane shot from here. And it's like, yes, but why are we doing the crane shot here? You know, why are we doing the wide? Why are we doing this? Like, give me a narrative reason for it, and then we'll do it, you know? So spend most of your time talking about the script.
Amazing. And moving to the complete other end of the project in post-production and working with the editor, like also focusing on the importance of narrative and structure. How do you, like, what are your top tips for working with an editor and structuring the film, and maybe like letting go of your preconceived ideas of how it should look?
Yeah, well, I think that's a good bit of advice what you're saying there. It's, you know, have an idea of kind of what you thought it was going to be, but, you know, keeping in mind the editor, I always think the editor is like the first impartial viewer. Like, they don't know the material as you do. So you kind of went and shot that, and it was really hard on the day, and it was raining, and we didn't get all the shots we wanted, and we had to shoot in the wrong direction because some guy parked a blue van there that you didn't want, you know, and you couldn't move it. So, you know, I don't want to use that shot anymore. And he or she who's editing will be like, I don't, you know, they don't have any of that attachment to the material. So, you know, they're going to come at it with a fresh set of eyes, which is, I think, invaluable actually. And like, you know, they kind of, you know, you get to watch what they've done and view it yourself in a new way. And I think that's great to have that open mind and just see like what they have thought to do with the material, and like, you know, oh, I didn't think about that in that way, and actually it works better. Or so that's kind of what I do. I just, you know, give them the freedom to present me with what they feel is the emotion in it, and you often get nice surprises in that way. And I think that's, you know, and I'll sort of go as far to say that's how I kind of treat everybody on the process. So it's like, you know, everybody has that freedom to kind of come at it from their point of view. And as a director, I feel like my job is more to guide rather than to like force or like do something a certain way. It's sort of like, okay, you know, maybe if they're veering off a bit too far in one direction, I can sort of like just tap it back in this direction or whatever. Or they might go veering off in that direction too far, and I think, oh, that's actually quite interesting, we'll go there for a bit. So that's kind of how I sort of, and that's exciting for me as well, because I can't think of all the stuff. Like, I can't think of everything. I don't have all the answers for everything, and somebody else might have a much better idea than me.
Definitely. And final question from me, what is your favorite aspect of directing?
My favorite aspect of directing is, that's a good question. I think it's probably, I mean, like I said, I think two things. I think the actual directing process I love, like on set, like I really do like it. You turn up every morning and you're tired and you've been on night shoots for a month and you're like, I don't want to get out of the car today, it's raining. And then as soon as you get out of the car and you start doing it, it's great. You know, I love that part of it. And it's scary and stressful and all those things, but when you're actually getting in the flow of it, I mean, the way I try and think about my day when I'm on set is like each shot is its own movie. And it's like each shot has a beginning, middle, of an end. And if I can get that little movie like right, and then I'm just keep making another little movie and then another little movie. And that's like, for me, that's a really exciting sort of way of making the film. And I'm not quite sure what's around the next corner. In some ways, obviously you have to plan as a director, but the part of the job is also like thinking, oh, like this is, you know, what's going to unfold next. I love that. Yeah, so I don't know if I answered your question properly there or waffled on. I can't remember.
No, that was perfect.
I was just wondering, in terms of like obviously directing such a kind of team effort, how do you go about assembling a team and kind of creating, I mean, you've spoken so much about kind of allowing everyone to kind of guide it in their own way, but creating a kind of cohesive tone throughout the project?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that's part of the challenge of a director, is that, you know, that the very nature of like filmmaking is it's not like any other artistry, like where you kind of, you know, it's very technical and it can be very artistic. It's like, but it's both. And also you have to be like a people person potentially, not always, but, you know, ideally it's a good skill to have, you know, to be able to kind of be a team leader and kind of like, you know, and actually that's it, you're a leader. You're not trying to sort of like force people into doing it a certain way, but you are there to guide, and people appreciate that as well. Like, you know, like the crew don't just want to go off and do their own thing. They want to be sort of like leader, you know, they want to have a leader sort of taking them off in a direction. And decisiveness is also useful as well. Like, people like a director who can make a decision about something, because if you can't make your mind up, that kind of gets people confused and frustrated, and you know, they'd rather just know they're focusing their energy on this one thing, and you're not going to keep changing your mind about it. So, you know, but like, I think getting a team as a TV director, like I often come on a job and inherit new people. So it's not always like I don't always have my crew on it or whatever. And I do have like a good crew. Well, I've got a few now, but you know, it's very rare that you all get to work together, because, you know, your jobs go out of sync and you're all jumping onto another one and they've already got a different thing and they're not available and all this kind of stuff. So you're always like working with new people. But, you know, like it only takes a few days before people start to click into your style or whatever else it is. You know, you do start to get into a rhythm with new people as well. But so I think, you know, you can do it with people you've never worked with. Ideally, you get people who understand you and, you know, you've worked with before. Obviously, that's amazing. But there is also exciting things about working with new people who bring new ideas to the table, and you don't just keep doing the same tricks. Yeah, so I don't know. But you're, you know, you are essentially like that at the helm of it, and you are leading it, and you do have the vision, and you know, you're guiding people gently towards that process without being forceful, I think.
And in terms of like the casting process, are you ever involved in that, kind of looking for actors? And then when you do have your actors, what sort of character discussions do you have with them? Like, what's important for you to kind of focus on and have as a collaborative conversation with them?
Yeah, so I am involved in castings quite a lot. Depending on the scale of the show, like I'll be more or less involved. But I've been on shows where I've sat in every casting, like with every actor, and found the right people. And you know, that what's quite fun. Castings can be quite laborious and drag out forever, and you're kind of like, it's hard to keep excited and whatever as a director. So I think the best thing you can do is almost like start experimenting with your material, then, you know, like use it for yourself, like start finding what the characters are for yourself, like get actors to come in, and even if you don't think they're right for the part necessarily, get them to try playing it a different way, and sort of go and finding and go, oh, that's interesting, but use it as a tool for yourself as well, not just to find, you know, the right person for the job, but also to find out what your material is and search it and use it and sort of workshop it with the actors. I'd say that's quite a good process. And then obviously once you do have your cast together, I don't think there's like a magic answer to this. And I think that, you know, you can approach it in many different ways. You could sort of not give the actors information about the characters and let them do their own thing, or let them make up their own backstories, unless that's really important to you and you feel like, you know, you need to give the character backstories exactly as they are because maybe they're based off people you know or whatever else. But I think also don't be so regimented that, like, even if you have a very clear idea of what you want that character to be, like, to not allow actors to bring new ideas as well, because you, like I said, you might find something exciting. And
Thank you so much. I was also just wondering, I'm coming from a slightly more theatre background, and I'm anticipating feeling quite like it might be difficult to anticipate the technical aspects of the project with the artistic kind of direction of it. And I was just wondering if you had any advice in terms of balancing those two things.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you're very lucky that you come from a theatre background, because that means you already have you know, a good experience working with actors, which, to be honest with you, a lot of screen directors, that's their probably often their weakest point to begin with, because they probably have come at it from more of a technical point of view. Not always, but you know, a lot of the directors tends to be more that way around, I think. And they're kind of scared. A lot of directors are scared of actors and stuff. So I wouldn't worry too much about that, you know, because what is important mostly is the performances between these people and the relationships and the narrative side of things. That's really the most important part of filmmaking. You know, the technical side of things, it is what it is. Like, you know, you can choose to get really involved in it, and it's definitely worth it as a director to start to understand it from an emotional point of view, if nothing more. So it's not about, you don't need to learn about every camera, you don't need to learn about every piece of equipment or whatever. You can just kind of, you know, and I'm sure you're well read and well watched in terms of media that's already out there. So you already have a film language. You know, you understand that. We all do. Like, we all grow up with movies and stuff, so we all understand the emotion. We all understand if, like, if we're listening to a character in an emotional scene, we're going to push in on their face and we're going to tighten up. You know, we all know that, and we know that when the camera starts to do that, it starts to make us feel something. So you probably already know a lot of these things. You don't need to come at it and say, well, I really need it to be like a run for Baker slide or a 4 foot to get the camera from there to there. Like, that's, your other crew can figure that stuff out. You can just say, I just want to push it, you know, and then you can talk about it emotionally. And that's, as long as you understand that side of things, you know, and I think that one of the slip ups that, like, inexperienced screen directors can make first time round is by fixating on something and saying, like, I really want the actors to stand over here, but that's going to not work in the favor of lighting or something, you know, and then what you're actually doing is you're tripping yourself up, because you're going to, perhaps it's going to take longer then for the DOP to try and make the light work or something like that. So having that conversation with the cinematographer and saying, you know, I really want the actors to stand over here, and they might say, well, yeah, but they're going to be front lit through the scene. That's not going to really look very good. And actually, if we just turned them around and did it this way, we'll be able to get much more coverage much quicker. And then you're like, and you got to weigh up, like, do I really need them to stand by the window, or can I have them there and get more coverage and finish on time? You know, so that's like that's as technical as you probably need to get mostly, but be open to not sticking to your guns about something that could actually just unfold the whole thing. You know, if somebody knows better than you.
Yeah. Thank you so much.
Yeah.
And I was also wondering, in terms of you talking about kind of shooting a scene as a sort of mini film in itself, and I was thinking about, like, pacing and making sure you kind of reach the kind of narrative climax of the film at the right moment. And I just was wondering if you had any advice in terms of pacing the tone and the energy and the emotional through line of the piece, so that it kind of has that climax you want it to, and, you know, has the emotional kind of peak when you actually intend it to.
Yeah, I mean, that's like one of those, probably you could probably do a masterclass in itself on that idea. You know, I think it's really, I don't know, yeah, it's not something necessarily that I would probably, like, be really focused on, like, as a sort of, like, I wouldn't necessarily map that out or anything. Like, there's certain parts of, like, the directing process that are, like, much more a kind of rhythmic intuition, like, you know, and I think that might be one of them. Like, you know, you probably could say, okay, this scene is like the turning point in the whole movie, so yeah, that's probably going to be like one that you're going to aim towards. But at the same time, like, I think it's something that you just kind of feel a bit more, and, you know, it's really hard to explain that. I think once you start coming at it from a technical point of view, that's probably when it might fall apart and might not actually work how you want it to. That's the bit that you as the director probably have control of, and you're feeling it out as a it's almost like a natural rhythm to the movie that you probably understand better than anybody else. So you are trying, and I think you'll just feel it, and you'll always try and guide it, and you'll say, you know, and it's an intuition more than anything, I think, that sort of thing. And you're sort of going, well, I need that actor to get from there to there because the energy is this, and it's going to lead me to this moment. And I actually use rhythm to describe directing quite a lot. Like, I think you feel the rhythm of a scene, like, you know, and that's when you know it's working. Like, but you might not know why, because sometimes it's not working, and you're going, why is this scene not working? And you can't quite put your finger on it, and you might just say, oh, it's because I'm trying to get that actor to do that, and actually I should just get them to do this, or they should just stand still, and actually I'm trying to get them to move around, and then all of a sudden it all comes together. But, you know, that's, I think that's a really hard one to answer as such, but I just say you just gotta, it's something that you'll just feel, I think, and you'll then just have to kind of try and get everyone else to feel it as well, which is probably the hard bit.
Did you have a chance to look over the scene that we sent you? If not, that's absolutely fine.
I did, yeah. Sorry, I unfortunately didn't have time to read the whole script, but I just read the last scene just before we jumped on the call, and I will read it, but
No, that's absolutely fine. Do you mind if I share and then like you share a few quick ideas about it? Or
yeah, we can do that, yeah, totally.
I'll share it now. I think, is it showing? I feel like it's showing half my screen, which is not very helpful.
No, I've got your whole thing there.
Okay,
well,
cool.
I've got the script, yeah.
Would it be helpful to put it in context?
Yeah,
it might. Yeah, I'm getting the gist of it, but yeah, definitely, please do fill me in.
So kind of preceding this is that the story is about two sisters who have quite a difficult relationship, although this isn't really explained. And one comes to visit the other at university and is just kind of playing up a bit. And this is the point in the story where they kind of finally have a moment together where they actually seem to be getting on. And so kind of in terms of the question that I was asking earlier, it's kind of the emotional peak, and wanted to kind of communicate that quite symbolically through this euphoric moment, like jumping into the water, and then it's then kind of coming down from that again and rushing to the station, and they've like lost track of time for the first moment in their time together, and then there's this kind of like awkward recovery from this moment of like emotional openness when they're saying goodbye to each other at the station and suddenly don't really know how to kind of cope with the fact that they are actually getting on. Yeah.
Well, the good news is that all came across in the script, so I got that. Like, yeah, and I even the backstory, I sort of imagined that might be the case. So you've done a really good job of getting that across. Even me just reading the last scene or two.
Thank you.
Yeah, no, completely.
Maddie, do you want to sort of like go through each page maybe and like talk about what your ideas were, and then Jamie, do you want to like think about what you thought about it as well?
Yeah, totally. I mean, like, yeah, absolutely. Like, however you want to do it, Maddie. I mean, I read it. I thought, to be quite honest with you, I thought it was like written really beautifully. Even the Bon Iver track and stuff like that. I got that. I kind of knew, like when I was like Bon Iver, I was like, I don't know. I think I know the name of that track, and I was like, that's the track. And then I had a quick listen on Spotify, and I was like, yeah, it's the track I imagine. So I can imagine the ripply water with just like the low sun setting over there, and it's just this beautiful, euphoric, like, yeah, completely all came across really, really lovely.
Yeah. Oh, that's so great. I guess kind of in terms of the scene, it's just, I think it will just be a technical working out with the DOP, and we're so lucky we're working with this girl called Chloe who kind of wants to be in the water with the actors. And I don't know if you've shot water scenes before, but I guess it's just going to be about experimenting with like capturing like the light and like, I don't know, just like the kind of texture of the water and skin and all this kind of stuff. And I don't know if you have any particular tips for that at all.
Well, funny enough, I have worked in water a few times, and but yesterday we did my first underwater shoot, which I've never done before, which was that was quite interesting. But I mean, I think your approach seems right. I think it's nice to, it feels like one of those scenes where, I tell you what's interesting. Like, one of the things to consider just generally, and this is just a tip for all scenes always, and telling these kind of stories. It's like, what's the point of view on the scene? Like, whose point of view is it? Is it one of these characters in particular as your main protagonist, and you following that point of view? So, which one is it that doesn't climb in to begin with? Is that so? Cass climbs in first, and yeah, and it's like, are we sitting on the shore with, watching Cass in the water, or are we with Cass wanting Thea to get into the water? Like, whose point of view are we? Like, are we trying to tease one character in, or are we trying to, go the other way? And that's something that, like, as a directing choice, is always the thing that I think about. Like, what's the point of view? Which character's point of view is this scene? Because actually, I think it is always good to pick one. That's something that's quite important. Who's a scaredy cat in the scene? Do we associate more with that character? Like, do we want to kind of, and there's probably more tension that way as well, So don't just jump in the water with the camera just because it looks cool, and you'd rather have it in there because that's going to tell the story in a very different way to if you stay on the shore and you see Cass as a little tiny figure, like for the first bit of that scene, like going, oh, I want to get in there with Cass, it looks really fun. And then all of a sudden, you know, we go in with Thea and then we're in the water, you know, like stuff like that. And then we're in there together and we're splashing around and all that kind of stuff. So that's sort of how I would approach this scene myself. I would like start thinking, and I wouldn't just be thinking, what's a cool shot? Should I get a wide? Should I get a close up? You know, I'd be thinking, what's the point of view that I'm telling? You know, and that would make me think more about the shots that I might need.
That's so interesting. And in terms of like kind of the film more generally, subjectivity is like something I've been thinking about, and I do really want to kind of switch between the two. And I think it would be really nice if once Thea is in the water, like we can kind of make it less one subjectivity or the other, but more like, okay, this is the kind of one moment in which they are
together.
Yeah, together, exactly.
Yeah.
But do you like, how do you kind of work between like switching subjectivities? Do you plot that like really clearly, and like is it important to you to kind of plot that out, I guess?
Yeah, probably. So that's that's kind of what I'm saying. It's like I think that's probably how I'd select my shots, you know. So that's the sort of thing where rather than just going, I need a wider close up and a close up, I'd go, I need a close up of Thea at this point of view, you know, at this point in the story. And you know, like I said, I might make the choice in this scene, and this might not be the right way to do it. This is just one way to do it. But I might stay on a close up of Thea sitting on the shore, like whatever it is, twiddling with the pebble and not climbing in, and then only playing Cass from over the shoulder as a wide, far away, you know. And that's kind of how I choose to do that. And then, but knowing that you're you know, but then there's nothing wrong also with going, say, to a close-up of Cass in the water and then seeing how she's feeling about it. And yeah, there's never like the right answer, but you'll just feel it. And actually, I guess the more coverage you have, the more you can sort of piece that together in the edit. I try not to do that so much, but then I've got quite a bit of experience now, so I tend to collect the shots I know I'm going to need more. Not that I'm always right, because I'm sometimes not, and I also might not think, oh God, why didn't I get closer to that? But you know what I mean. So that's kind of how I'd sort of think about it. But there's no like, I don't think you need to worry too much about, you know. Yeah, I don't know. I probably would plan it out in terms of point of view, but at the same time, there's no harm in sort of doing matching shots on each and then figuring it out later. And you know, you might want that freedom, you know, at this stage in your filmmaking career to have the freedom to experiment. So you know, get the equal shots on both and figure it out.
Thank you so much. Also, this is such a practical question that's like popped into my head, but since you were shooting an underwater scene like yesterday, like how do you kind of keep the actors like comfortable and like, you know, they're
It's great difficulty. It's keeping actors comfortable is probably the hardest part of the job ever. But yeah, I mean, we were we were in the studio as well, so we had the benefit of a heated tank, which you definitely aren't going to have. So keeping the actors comfortable, yes. Water scenes are always like going to be problematic for that reason anyway. Like, you know, you just have to find some actors who are like well up for the job, and they're like, you know what, we'll do it. But I advise like, yeah, I mean, summer weather, Britain. Are you shooting this? When are you shooting it?
summer.
Okay, so it's gonna be more bearable. But you know, is it that like, okay, so for example, that you've got them sort of stripping down a little bit, so they take off most of their stuff and then they climb in, so they're going to be chilly, definitely, and you're going to need to do multiple takes, and they're going to be freezing and miserable. You're going to want to try and capture that mood. So okay. So there's a really good example of like how creatively you might be able to solve the problem. For example, rather than thinking, okay, I need all the shots of everybody doing everything all the time, why don't you think about it like, do it in a more spontaneous way, for example. So you get, you know, your shots of Thea on the shore, you get your shots of Cass dipping a toe in and sort of like thing. And then when she runs in, you know, maybe shoot a master like handheld and just get like Thea to run in, and you just stay in there and you do just like a couple of takes and you keep shooting lots of little bits of coverage that you can cut together, and you've got Bon Iver like playing over it anyway. So it's going to be all montagey and beautiful. And I would almost say just do it in a couple of takes and it's spontaneous, and just don't rehearse it and just get them to just play it. and then you've done it and you've got it, and you're not going, oh, I need more shot. You know what I mean? Because that's going to be the best way you're ever going to do that, and they're going to have all their adrenaline going. And the beauty of the kind of film that you're making, which is like this very fluid, I imagine, sort of free, like shooting into the sun, like lens flares and stuff, like that's kind of what you want to just treat it like really indie, and just go in and do it, because you're probably not going to get many takes, I guarantee you that. Or your other alternative is, you know, you keep them in their clothes and you put like a little wetsuit underneath, and then it's fun that they're in their clothes doing it, and it's a bit more, you know, so that might make it more kooky or whatever. So you know, another creative solution to a problem of your actors being cold is keep them in the clothes and put a wetsuit underneath.
Amazing. I think that's such a good note to end on. Thank you so much. That was really, really interesting.
No worries, guys. Yeah, no, great. Whereabouts are you shooting it?
In Cambridge, yeah.
Cambridge, beautiful. Oh, lovely. Well, if you ever want any more help, you know, just like off the record, just give me a shout. Good luck with it, and yeah, speak to you soon.